All right. Hello. Welcome to the Daily Faded. My name is Hetz, and this is where we get faded daily and talk about politics and news of the day. First, we start like this. I packed a fat bowl of the Skywalker OG tonight, and it tastes good. It tastes good. So, yesterday's news today. Something went wrong, and I wasn't able to start the live stream last night. And I thought that the user interface for YouTube had completely changed, but then I tried to do a test run today to figure it out, and then everything was working fine. So here we are. It seems to be working fine. Seems to be working fine. Anyway, so I'm going to start, as we always do, with the COVID-19 update. 3.7 million cases worldwide, which is up over 5%, and 256,920 deaths, which is up over 4%. In the United States, it's 1.2 million cases confirmed, which is up over 4%, and 71,670 deaths, which is up over 4%. California, we're at 56,000 cases. We're up just under 1% today, and 2,294 deaths were up on just under 1% on that as well. So that's the update. It still looks pretty bleak. It still looks pretty dire. So I'm going to smoke some more. Very important to note, the idea is not for you to sit there and watch me get stoned. The idea is for you to also smoke with me or have a drink or do whatever you like to do to relax. Rub your kitten. So because I didn't stream last night, I actually really wanted to talk about a bunch of things from yesterday. So I'm only going to include a couple of quick updates that change things a little bit today. First, I want to talk about Gavin Newsom's big news conference yesterday. God damn it, Gavin Newsom is very impressive. He just is so smart and on the ball and projects such great empathy. So he announced yesterday that California will start tracing 3,000 tracers a week starting on Wednesday in a combined effort between the state of California and the UC system, particularly UC San Francisco. The tracers will report to 61 health directors around the state, which is all the counties plus 3 additional health directors. And the goal is to get to 10,000 within a month, and then to set a new goal of 10,000 and have 20,000 within 2 months. Now, given that the estimates for how many contact tracers we need are between 100,000 and 300,000, I would think that the 40 million of 330 million people that are in California would be well served by 20,000 contact tracers. I think very well served. And who knows how, depending on how things go, maybe it turns into 30,000 or 40,000, depending on what happens after we start to reopen. And remember, the CDC has a grand total of 1,250 contact tracers. So phase 2 guidelines for reopening in California are coming out on Thursday. Retailers, as long as they follow the guidelines for operating their businesses safely, can sell at curbside pickup. Localities that don't want to go further yet don't have to, and some rural communities can petition the state to go further more quickly. He was quick to point out that if testing and hospitalizations indicate a surge in cases, we may have to toggle back to the way it is now. But I wanted to quote Gavin Newsom. When he was speaking, he said, quote, "This is an optimistic day as we see a little bit of sunlight on the horizon." And I thought, good God, compare that to Trump for nuance and subtlety. Trump's been acting like a fool, pretending like this thing is all over for at least a week, if not 2 or 3 weeks now. And he refuses to acknowledge the pain and the suffering. And I think to say it's an optimistic day as we see a little bit of sunlight on the horizon, implicit in that is that there's a lot of darkness and that it's been really tough. And yeah, we're just seeing a glimpse of sunlight on the horizon. So I was very impressed. Now, the doctor came on. I'm sorry, I didn't write her name down. And she laid out the key roadmap for California in reopening. There are 6 things that are the benchmarks that need to be watched as relates to reopening the economy. The stability of hospitalizations, sufficient PPE inventory, healthcare surge capacity, testing capacity, contact tracing capability, and public health guidance in place. Moving into phase 2 Friday, but it will only include certain industries not opening offices, shopping malls, or seated dining. So that'll be interesting. I need to get some. I need to get something at Bed Bath and Beyond. So I don't know, but I don't think I'm likely to do that anytime soon. I think I'm going to be in the paranoid group of people who become agoraphobic for a while and don't want to go out. Before I get to the main things that I wanted to talk about tonight, there were just 2 things yesterday that I wanted to mention. One was an amazing tweet by an Iraqi journalist whose name I don't have handy. Hold on a second. I do have it handy because I follow him on Twitter. Zaidi Mon-Thur, journalist Zaidi Mon-Thur. He's an Iraqi journalist who threw both shoes at George W. Bush in one of the great moments in recent American history. It was a press conference where George Bush was speaking to the Iraqi press, and this guy stands up and he hucks a shoe at him, and then he stands up and then he hucks his other shoe at him, and Bush dodged them both, to his credit. And he responded to the video, the nationalist rah-rah, look at how we're all getting through this together video that George W. Bush put out over the weekend, which actually is a very nice video. If you don't care that he's a war criminal, then it's a very nice video. So Hader Mon-Thur tweeted, "Your account balance has 1 million dead in Iraq only. You have no right to talk about victims, and I think you are no less bad than Corona." Now, it may sound harsh to compare a person to the coronavirus, but if there's one relevant comparison between a person and the coronavirus, it is the death toll that person or coronavirus has caused. And right now, the death toll for coronavirus is about 250,000 people. The death toll of all of George W. Bush's military actions in Iraq and Afghanistan is probably upwards of 1.5 million people. So, anyway, I thought that was a great tweet, and I wanted to mention it because I like the guy because he threw his shoes at George W. Bush. If you can't, if you can't drive them out of your country, you at least can throw a shoe at them, or at least throw both shoes at them. And then I also wanted to mention that yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the Kent State shootings, where 4 students were shot during anti-war protests by National Guardsmen at Kent State in Ohio. And I mentioned it. I wanted to mention it because this country has a long history of using military violence against its own citizens. And that is one very shameful such episode. And it's important that we remember that history. So I simply wanted to mention it. Now, with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about events over the weekend. There were a lot of protests against the stay-at-home orders over the weekend, and the protests turned out to be quite racist in some cases. Not all of them, certainly, but at least in Illinois, there were swastikas and Heil Pritzker. And then maybe somewhere else, or maybe also in Illinois, there was someone carrying a sign that said Arbeit Macht Frei. Now, I've been to a concentration camp and I've seen Arbeit Macht Frei up close and personal. And it's really a stupid thing to put on a sign and take to a protest about staying at home because of a pandemic. It's really stupid, and I don't know what message they're sending. That they're sending the message that they're being treated like the Jews were treated in Germany. Is that what they're treating? Is that what they're saying? Because going back to work could get them killed. So how would that make them free? I don't know. It's very confusing. And one has to err on the side of it's terrible and it's completely it's just completely wrong, anti-Semitic. And I think that the racism that we saw in those protests really is an upfront reminder of the undercurrent to the Reopen America movement, which is that it's racist. And I've been accused of calling things racist too many times. I will admit it. But this is absolutely racist. And it's racist because the frontline workers, the low-wage workers, who are disproportionately people of color, they are disproportionately women, they are disproportionately Latino, are the workers who will be going out into the world and taking the first risks, which means they are the ones who will be exposed to COVID-19, and they are the ones who will die as a result of the reopening of the economy. That's not to say that everyone who wants to reopen the economy is racist. I don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of people who may or may not understand the science, depending on where they get their news, and they really need their paycheck, and they really need to be working again. So I think there are some people of goodwill, but I don't think the ones saying Heil Pritzker about Illinois Governor, I think, I don't remember his first name, J.B. Pritzker, I think, or is that someone else? I don't know. Someone Pritzker. Anyway, Stone, Now, the push to reopen in Georgia by Brian Kemp is a particularly racially charged situation. Brian Kemp disenfranchised a lot of black voters in Georgia prior to the 2018 gubernatorial race that he narrowly won. Stacey Abrams refuses to admit defeat, and I think she's right to refuse to admit defeat, because he should not have been Secretary of State overseeing his own gubernatorial election. That's an obvious conflict of interest, and anyone who doesn't see it is lying. So the reopening in Georgia, the retail workers and the restaurant workers and all of the people who are going to be exposed, disproportionately black and brown and female lives. These are in many ways the same people that Brian Kemp actively disenfranchised from voting in 2018. So he basically looks at this portion of his state and says, you're expendable. I don't care what happens to you. It doesn't matter. The wealthy white donors who Brian Kemp relies on to run his campaign, to pay for his campaign, they're all able to stay at home. They're all able to take considerable precautions that a lot of low-wage laborers won't be able to do. And it's also class war. Charles M. Blow pointed out yesterday in the New York Times, quote, "For many on the lower rungs of the economic ladder, it will only force them back into compulsory exposure to more people, often in occupations that make it hard to protect oneself and that pay little for the risk." So I think he summed it up beautifully there, and I wanted to give him credit. Sometimes I like Charles M. Blow. Also, Liz Brunig had a great piece in the New York Times. I'm so happy that she's on the editorial staff there. If you read the New York Times at all, check out Liz Brunig's piece about Joe Biden from, I think, 2 days ago. So Brian Kemp represents the anti-science of reopening. He also represents the racism of reopening. In the larger picture, this pandemic will set back women, people of color, and low-wage workers the most. The economy will become more racist and more inhabitable for people working some of the hardest, lowest paying work. Wealth inequality, especially as a result of the CARES Act, is going to continue to soar because of this pandemic. And, perhaps if we didn't have two parties controlled by corporations running our government, maybe we could have plans that would actually work. This is an aside. I wasn't planning on mentioning this tonight, but I saw Mark Cuban gave an interview to Crystal Ball and Sagar Enjeti on Rising on the Hill TV today. I think it was today. And he argued for a federal jobs guarantee and the hiring of millions of people to do contact tracing, to do deep cleaning, to become testers, to do the many things that need to get done in our society right now to navigate this pandemic. And what was fascinating to me is hearing this coming from Mark Cuban, a billionaire, a self-proclaimed capitalist. And it is the exact same argument that Professor Richard Wolff has been making for over a month about the mistakes that the current government is making when it's so obvious what you could do to fix the problem. So that's an interesting shakeup in what's acceptable political discourse. And that makes me happy. I don't really care what billionaires say, by and large. But it was interesting to hear one speaking like a Marxist. Mike Pompeo lied on TV on Sunday and said that there was evidence that the coronavirus came from a virology lab in Wuhan, China. Fox News had a town hall with Trump Sunday night, which I read about and was making notes about from my reading. It didn't mention in the articles that I read. Somehow it was not mentioned that it was held at the Lincoln fucking Memorial with Trump and two dunderheads from Fox sitting there in front of Abe Lincoln, with Trump actually comparing himself to Abe Lincoln in the interview. It was such propaganda. It was so horrible. It was, oh. Anyway, Trump chimed in, quote, "My opinion is they made a mistake. They tried to cover it. They tried to put it out. It's like a fire. You know, it's really like trying to put out a fire. They couldn't put out the fire. We're going to be giving a very strong report as to exactly what we think happened," Trump said, "and I think it will be very conclusive." Well, I don't think he knows what the fuck he's talking about, because the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a statement that the intelligence indicates the virus was naturally occurring and did not come from a lab in Wuhan. That was a big hit. What was I talking about? So this is just another case of Trump making things up, just fabricating whatever he feels like fabricating and telling whatever lie he feels like telling. And at least 35% of voters, 35 to 40% of voters buy this shit. And Pompeo has since said within the span of a minute that there is evidence that it came from a lab in Wuhan, and there is evidence, and there is no evidence that it came from a lab in Wuhan. He said them both within the course of a minute in an interview that I heard today. So, I don't have any reason to believe the office of the DNI either. But until there's some kind of hard evidence, I wouldn't believe the Wuhan lab thing. But above and beyond believing the Wuhan lab thing is, I don't really care if it came from a lab in Wuhan. I mean, I care if it was a bioweapon, but if it was a virology lab that was working on coronaviruses and trying to do some sort of important research, and somehow it got out of the lab, what's the difference between that and it jumped from animal to human in a wet market? I don't see really a difference. We've got virology labs that are doing the same kind of work here. So what's the difference if that's where it originated, which is one of the stories that's circulating in the right-wing conspiracy zone. So I thought the biggest story yesterday, well, in a way, I guess I thought there were two stories that were the biggest stories yesterday, and I think they were bigger than any stories that I saw today. So I thought, okay, I'll just go ahead and talk about that. A CDC document was obtained by the New York Times that predicts that by early June, there will be 200,000 new infections a day and 3,000 deaths a day from coronavirus. I think that's the biggest news, really, in a while. That's terrible news. That's just terrible news. And along with that, at the same time, well, here, let me read you a little bit here from the New York Times. As President Trump presses for states to reopen their economies, his administration is privately projecting a steady rise in the number of cases and deaths from the coronavirus over the next several weeks, weeks, reaching about 3,000 daily deaths on June 1st, according to an internal document obtained by the New York Times, nearly double from the current level of about 1,750, which I think is low personally. The quote, the projections based on modeling by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and pulled together in chart form by the Federal Emergency Management Agency forecast about 200,000 new cases each day by the end of the month, up from about 25,000 cases daily now. So this got reported over and over again yesterday. And the CDC and the White House have both since said that it was not vetted and it's not true and it's not real. But who are you going to believe? Right? Who are you going to believe? I'm much more inclined to believe some document that came out of the CDC that I wasn't supposed to see. I'm more inclined to believe that than I am to believe what those fuckers are actually saying. Life is cheap in late stage capitalism, is what it comes down to. Life is cheap. So they know. So, and this corresponds to the University of Washington Institute of Health and Medical something or other, IHME model shifting from, well, this is the model that had predicted 2.2 million deaths if nothing was done. And this is the model that predicted 100,000 to 220,000 deaths the first time that Trump cited it. And this is the model that later, when we were in the middle of lockdown, brought the estimate down to 60,000. And since then, it's gone up to the mid 60s, up to the mid 70s, and now it's up to 134,475 deaths by August 1st or 4th or something like that. There remains a large number of counties now whose burden continues to grow, the CDC warned. The projections confirm the primary fear of public health experts, that a reopening of the economy will put the nation right back where it was in mid-March, when cases were rising so rapidly in some parts of the country that patients were dying on gurneys in hospital hallways as the healthcare system grew overloaded. So if you separate New York and the tri-state area from the rest of the country, you get a different image than the image of the country as a whole. New York cases are steadily declining. Hospital admissions are declining. ICU admissions are declining. People are still dying every day, but death is a lagging indicator in a pandemic. So if you take New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey out of the equation, and you look at the rest of the country is either plateaued or rising. I believe 20 states are rising. So if you look at the IHME model, there's very little reason to think, I mean, maybe we'll have a dip in deaths and it'll get really low for a little while, but the interaction, the intermeddling, the speaking to people, socializing, and people violating rules and doing big barbecues and shit like that is going to cost lives. And all that matters is the economic incentive to the Trump team. And the grand irony of that is that they're stupid because they think people are just going to go running out and expose themselves to this disease. A lot of Americans are not ready to do that. I'm not ready to do that. I don't know about you, but no, I'm not going to go sit in a crowd of any kind. And yeah, I would be nervous about doing seated dining in a restaurant. I would be nervous about that now. People take their masks off. You're sharing the same space with them. This thing can last in the air for quite a while. You know, the economy's not going to suddenly rebound and rocket back up like Trump says it will, because Trump says it. So obviously it's not true. But nonetheless, they're willing to sacrifice people. They're willing to sacrifice people to get what they think they're going to get out of this. Even Trump callously said in the Fox News town hall, callously said, we'll lose 75, 80 to 100,000 people to COVID-19. This is a guy who was tap dancing when the estimate was 60,000. And now, very quickly, we've passed that, and we've got a long ways to go. So, anyway, on that cheerful thought, I do tell you this. I've got more stuff for you tomorrow night already. This has been the Daily Faded. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow night. Peace out. Stay home. Stay safe. Stay well.